You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another bone-tingling, exciting episode of Global Trade This Week. I'm Pete Mento, and I am joined yet again by our backup quarterback, Keenan. You're probably wondering why we continue to subject you to this. It's simply because we have grown to love and value occasionally Keenan's insights. It's like any good organization. You've got to bring the next generation of professionals up. You got to give them an opportunity to shine, in the hopes that when your opportunity, your time in the sun has passed, that they have that chance as well. So, whatever one of us is sidelined with injury, next man up. That's just how it is. And I think Doug is where he's in the Amazon right now.
Somewhere down in the rainforest.
Retreat? On an ayahuasca
that sounds
retreat?
about right. We'll double check with him next week, but I think that's right.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome, Keenan. Yeah. Nothing makes me happier than trading barbs with you. I'm kind of upset that there's no Bitcoin opportunity. There's no Bitcoin story for us this week.
Yeah, I thought about putting some stuff in there, but it's a little forcing it. We'll get there.
Yeah. Since
the latest meme on that, memes on that I've seen are that eggs are the new Bitcoin, with the price of eggs going up around the country.
Well, check. It's funny you mentioned that because I'm old and out of the loop, Keenan. I'd say 2 weekends ago, I went to the grocery store and I have my little list because I can't be sent to the grocery store without a list. And on that list was eggs. And you have chickens, so it's not quite, it's easier for you. But I went to the grocery store and there were no eggs. No eggs. So when I go to the grocery store and there isn't something I was sent to get, I sent a picture of the empty shelves to prove that I'm not just full of shit. So I sent a picture of that to Amy and Haston to say, hey, listen, there's no eggs. And I don't even think during the pandemic I ever went to the grocery store and didn't see eggs, buddy.
Nope. It's kind of wild. I'm surprised to hear. Go ahead.
How many eggs do your chickens lay? It's a lot.
It does slow down in the winter, but I get about 4 or 5 a day. So more than I consume a day. So I usually have enough to have a stock if we end up making a bunch for people or give some away to friends and neighbors. So feels good having that in stock. But yeah, interesting to hear you had empty shelves as well. I know Colorado was experiencing empty egg shelves. Part of that, I heard Colorado passed a law about they have to be free range. And so it's kind of, I didn't know if that was just a specifically close to Colorado type of issue, but it seems like even the regular run of the mill dozen eggs are hard to find and get more expensive.
Keenan, this is New Hampshire. Okay. We don't have rules. You can buy your 15-year-old a pistol for his birthday. It's,
So that's why I'm surprised that the egg stocks just aren't there.
Yeah.
Demand, supply, mismatch.
But what was strange, buddy, is I had to stop myself from hoarding. I really thought about it. I was sitting there looking at this shelf of eggs, and I really did think to myself, should I just get 4 dozen? But then I thought, what am I going to do with 4 dozen eggs? It's just...
I mean, we'll get into this later on in another topic, but I thought the same thing during the pandemic when barrel of oil was temporarily negative price. I was like, oh man, I should just stock up on this. Where am I going to put it? Who am I going to get it off to? This isn't a practical plan at all. Same thing with eggs with a shelf life.
Yeah. Well, you have won the toss and elected to receive. So
that's right.
You get the chance with the first topic this week, buddy.
Awesome. So kicking off here with some new data from the U.S. Census Bureau, Canada is still the top U.S. trading partner ahead of Mexico. Mexico and Canada are both pretty close right now. It's like 62.4 billion for Mexico as of November, and 63.4 as of November for Canada. So doing a lot of trade with our neighbors to the north and south. It looks like they're growing at pretty healthy clips, 6%, 5% respectively. It's beating out China on that. And it's just interesting to see some of the factors going on around that. On the good news, our trade deficit is at a low right now, just with us consumers spending a little less, importing a little less, still exporting. Lots of industries are still trading and doing their things. It seems like a lot of auto parts and trucks and buses are a big driver of it. Also, something interesting along with this story and along with some of the stories you've been talking about recently is that China is building their first, I don't know, but announces a first plant in Mexico, this Chinese manufacturer, Noah iTech. And they make a lot of automation manufacturing equipment bought by companies like GM, which is also looking to expand their Mexico plant for EV production, and used by companies like Tesla. And it also sounds like Tesla is just on the verge of announcing to build a factory in Nuevo Leon. So interesting to see as everyone experienced the last couple of years supply chain disruption, prices got really expensive. Even now, as there's way more capacity on ocean and aircraft availability, there are moves now. Some of these supply chain investments, capital investments take a while. There are moves to do the sort of nearshoring that you hear people talk about. I've heard people talk about it for a long time, but looks like we're actually seeing some movement on that. So yeah, any thoughts on Canada being number one temporarily? Mexico's right on their tail too, and any of that trend on nearshoring or anything around our trade deficit even?
Lots and lots of thoughts. So the movement of a lot of companies to Mexico has been it's just been happening for a long time, and big swaths of that have come from, first of all, a fear of the theft of intellectual property. So being able to control the insertion of intellectual property into production in Mexico prior to export to the U.S. makes a lot of sense. And then second of all, of course, labor has just always been very inexpensive in Mexico. It always has been and continues to be even now with the change in the global platforms of how so much exporting has been happening in other countries like China. There's been an increase in a race of a race towards trying to become a more technical export economy. Mexico just hasn't really happened yet. And I'd also say that a lot of that automation that you're seeing that's happening down there, we're beginning to see people build automation in Mexico for export around the world. So that's fascinating to me. Well, on the Canadian side, Canada has always been a major trading partner with the United States because of energy. And I think that America was importing a lot of energy because of the lack of Russian energy exports. But it wasn't just that. You had a lot of cars being brought to the United States through the pandemic, a lot of car parts for manufacturing here, and those were artificially inflated. But the same goes for produce, same goes for wood and lumber, building materials, and that's slowing down. So many American companies were told, board of directors were telling their CEOs and major shareholders, we don't want to be in this position again where we find ourselves unable to produce products, unable to keep our supply chains going because we were just too dependent on Asian supply chains. You got to have some balance here. So I think we're just going to continue to see an investment in the USMCA countries. I think you're going to see a continued investment in that supply chain. What I'm worried about, Keenan, and I feel like this is a broken record out of me. We need a stronger logistics infrastructure in order to make this just a more compelling argument. The congestion is still so terrible. The roads, the railways, the ports just aren't good enough through there. Someone needs to put the money into it. What I'm worried about is that it's going to end up being the Chinese. And now the Chinese are going to have a choke point at the ports, the airports, and through the railways. It's not going to matter who's managing the production if we can't get products in and out.
Interesting. So in addition to them building factories in Mexico, maybe we'll see some of the things like we've seen with Chinese investment in African ports and that type of logistics infrastructure. We could be seeing some of that. I'll have to keep an eye out. Interesting.
Yeah, it worries me.
Indeed.
So that takes me to my very first topic. I have not had a job since my first job when I was Pete at Panalpina. when I did not have a non-compete. So one of the just standard things in this business is, in a lot of businesses, we're not special, but certainly in logistics and the service industry, is forcing people in client service, sales, and people in executive roles to sign a non-compete in it's like a non-poach agreement, where for a period of time you are unable to go after your existing clientele and to go after some of your colleagues for a period of time, whether it's 12 months or 24 months. And for somebody like me who's fortunate enough to go from consulting to logistics, it's not so bad, because I can go from selling customs services like customs entries and logistics to going into consulting, where I can sell finance and tax stuff. It's not so terrible. But for most people in our industry, it can really be a financial burden. So you go to work for someone, you work there for 10 or 15 years, you build an incredible book of business. And then for the next 2 years, let's say, you can't contact anyone that you worked with. And you could find yourself being sued. You could find yourself, on the wrong end of a subpoena, on the wrong end of a cease and desist, because you contacted a former customer or client. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that this is in a court case now that it looks like it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And it's starting to look like it's going to win, where it's considered to be unconstitutional to force someone to have to adhere to a non-compete, because the individual has a right to make a living. For our industry, this is a fascinating change, because I can only speak for logistics. I'm sure there are other businesses that are a lot like ours, but a salesperson who's been with a company for 10 or 15 years, a lot of their relationships could easily be ported to another company. And it could create bidding wars, where someone like me is an example, who has deep, long-standing, decades-long relationships with people, could end up being swayed away to another company on the hopes that that individual would be able to bring their quote unquote book of business with them someplace else. And there's nothing anyone could do about it. So I wonder what that's going to mean. And I wonder what it's going to mean for these corporations and for individual companies who now don't have any way of trying to maintain that business for a number of years while someone goes from place to place. I don't know, Keenan, it's an interesting topic, and I'll be just personally, because I signed a non-compete when I came to work here. What it's going to be, I'm sure Doug had to sign one as well. We both just recently changed jobs. So it's going to have big ramifications for our business.
It does seem like that's been a pretty industry standard, as well as in some other industries. I don't know the ins and outs, but there are definitely tech company type non-compete situations and lawsuits, and along with that, it's interesting. I'll want to keep an eye and follow this case as it goes to the Supreme Court, because you're right, that would have a pretty large impact in the near term. Potentially good for workers with relationships. Maybe pay goes up a little bit. Another thought that comes to mind is, are companies going to shift their strategies and move away from sort of an account-based management sales system and go more for incentivizing people to bring on new customers, but then you're no longer the one talking to that customer? That's operations, that's someone else, and try to change up the sales organization a little bit if this is going to be a new change.
Yeah. It's always important to have multiple people and multiple levels engage with a client. And that's the corporation's detriment when you don't do that. So hopefully this will get people thinking more intelligently about how they relate to their clients.
All right. Good story. So yeah, we'll definitely watch it.
We get to halftime, which is Doug's favorite part, and he's not here. So I can say it is not my favorite part of the show. Halftime brought to you by people put on our show, Cap Logistics, the good people at Cap Logistics. To learn more, you can learn more about them at caplogistics.com. We thank them for funding the show this week and every week. If you are a frequent listener, frequent watcher, if you watch it on YouTube, listener, if you listen to it on the podcast, please do check us out. Check out Cap Logistics at caplogistics.com. They pay Keenan's salary, and it's a simple life up in the mountains without energy or electricity or running water, eating pine tar and bark, drinking,
investing my income in chickens and chicken feed.
That's right. Hey, listen, man, the end's coming. So So that, yes, please check them out at caplogistics.com. So Keenan, you can go first. What do you have this week for us at halftime?
Speaking of the end coming, I am prepared for halftime this week with a story about an incoming comet that has not been nearby in our solar system for about 50,000 years. So that's a lot of history where we were in Stone Age type civilizations back 50,000 years ago. But I'm always someone who likes to watch, cool moon eclipses and different things going on, and I never know about them ahead of time enough. So I want to do my public service announcement duty to all of you listeners and watchers that check it out this month, kind of coming up throughout January and into February. We're going to be seeing green colored comet. It should be visible with the naked eye, but especially if you have a telescope or a set of binoculars. And as an armchair astronomer, I like to watch this stuff. It's enjoyable. I like to use it as a reason to learn what's going on. One of the things that I think scientists have been incorporating more and more now, we used to think comets were what was called the icy rocky theory, something more eloquent than that, but it was just like a big icy thing, and it would heat up with the sun, and that's why it would melt and make its tail. Seems to be more common or recent understandings now that we've had some missions land on some comets and different things. They seem to be more rocky. There's not a lot of ice on them from what we've seen, and so the tails are ions, like plasma discharges, as something that's been hanging out really far away from the sun picks up the charge of being way out there. And as it comes in close, that charge differential kind of makes it glow and it throws off those ions. So it's not melting ice, it's electrical charge difference. As you move a magnet next to a copper coil, right, there's electrical phenomenon there. It's similar with a comet hanging out in deep space, coming closer to our sun. There's some electromagnetic forces there, which is also cool to learn about and visualize when you see a bright green object in the sky.
Yeah, so this is coming from me on this show, Keenan. God, you're a nerd.
It's true.
So as soon as you sent this,
prefer the term geek, less derogatory.
Geek. Okay, amen. I love it. I do love it, and I'll be looking at it too. But the first thing I thought of was what sort of dystopian, awful thing does this? Is it actually just this comet that's going to change course all of a sudden and it come and there's vampires on it, or is it going to radiate? Like what sort of awful thing? Walking Dead, right? Like you brain eaters. So as soon as I saw Green Comet coming, I went straight to Armageddon. I got pretty excited. This just seems like a comic book. Speaking of geeks, comic book plot come to life. I was pretty fired up.
Speaking of geeks and etymology, the term disaster literally means in Latin bad star. And so, in times past when we didn't have as much scientific understanding of space, there would be a lot of, we have this comet, it's a bad omen, people are going to die, or we're going to win this battle, those sorts of things. Not expecting any big fireworks, though. If you were to get out there, I know a lot of people have been watching the Netflix Graham Hancock Ancient Apocalypse type ideas. And so I don't think this comet would have been associated with the Younger Dryas about 12,000 years ago, but that's kind of their theory, is that there is this 12,000 or more type cycle of a comet where it's not the main comet that hits us, but maybe parts of the comet that had broken off, and maybe that hit a bunch of glaciers and melted it all rapidly and changed things from the Ice Age to the type of climate we know and love here. So, maybe it's entirely possible, as Joe Rogan might say.
Yeah, true. Joe used to say a lot more fun stuff than that back in the day. So oldest daughter and I were having a conversation yesterday. It's funny you said disaster and you talked about the etymology behind it. I really love this trend now to say misinformation, and I'm challenging everyone to say stop. Nope, nope, lie. It's a lie. Misinformation is a lie. We call it a lie. Oh, it's just misinformation. No, it's not. It's trick fuckery most foul. It's a lie. It's counter espionage. It's a lie. We're going to call it what it is. It's horse pucky. So let's just get down to saying the truth, okay? Oh, well, this person's using misinformation. If it's not right, then it's wrong. And if you're saying things that are wrong and you're doing it on purpose, then you're lying.
That's a lie.
Liar, liar pants. So my halftime is a little more, I guess it's a little more bubbly. I've been looking a lot at the fashion the kids today wear. And Keenan, someone needs to tell them that when we dressed that way in the 1980s, it looked stupid. And they look stupid too. So I wish Doug were here to whip out a picture of him in his Ronnie James Dio 3/4 sleeve baseball shirt with his acid wash jeans and his Adidas high tops with his laces undone. I guarantee you he had clothes like that. And his Velcro wallet. This trend that everybody has to dress like we dressed back then is ridiculous. So I don't understand it. I saw some kids on some TV news show the other day that were skiing in New Hampshire, and they were dressed in throwback 80s gear, but they were standing next to kids in today's snowboarding gear. It didn't look that different, man. Like it kind of looked like they were dressed like my friends and I dressed when we would go skiing in the 1980s. And somebody needs to tell them that our drugs weren't as strong. Our music was much better. But we at least had the sense not to dress that way, man. So someone needs to sit these kids down. And it's my generation. It's all the Gen Xers. We need to sit our kids down and say to them, roll up a newspaper, smack them on the nose and say, no, because it has to stop. So that's my halftime today, Keenan. Someone's got to sit these kids down.
Good luck if you could break through to them. It may be sort of rebellious. If you don't want them to, they may do it even more. And that's funny you mentioned the ski outfits because there's usually, some spring parties at the end of the year, Gaper Day type things where everyone does dress up. And a lot of it has historically kind of gone back 80s style. But now it's just going to be Gaper Day all day, every day, the whole snowboarding season, huh?
Well, the thing, Keenan, is like, I'm not going to say generally, but usually the younger ladies are going to look better, right? So those outfits look pretty darn good on the ladies in the 80s. But just take a random sample. Just take a random sample of what young men look like in between 1983 and 1988. One word's going to come to mind: unscrewable. Okay, every single one of us. And here you are all running around like you still look real super cute if you were a girl back in the 80s. But the guys, we looked stupid. Mullets and skin tight jeans with our Reeboks on and just dumb. So why are we doing this to ourselves? You're making it hard, man. You're making it really difficult. Just save yourself.
They'd be better off if they listened to your wisdom. They might not in the spirit of rebellion, but to use some of the kids' lingo these days, if you want to break through to them in their own language, you could call their outfit chuggy or cringe. That would be the insult du jour.
How about just dumb, stupid? You look stupid, kids. All right, Keenan, what's your second topic, buddy?
Yeah, second topic was a little bit of a surprise to me, and I don't know if I know the whole story, but China is signaling a surge in oil demand with a 20% increase in refiner oil output quotas, import quotas. And so, from the little I've been watching, I stay somewhat up to date on geopolitics or international economics. China's not been in a great spot lately. They've been having a lot of troubles. So it's been interesting to see that while we've had some oil prices come down a little bit lately, now we're in winter and that's somewhat to be expected, but it's been kind of a rough time for oil prices generally. We are going into maybe slowdown recession type stuff more and more this year than we've already seen, but it looks like China is expecting to need more oil. So without knowing all the details, I think this is another sign of what was already kind of on the horizon, that we're going to be seeing higher oil prices this year. Have you been following this any closer, or what are your initial takes on this type of news?
I have been watching it, and there's a few things that are a little bit counterintuitive. So number one is China has been getting more and more engaged in the refining process. So that's got something to do with it. So there will be higher desires to purchase raw material for refine and then export. So I think that's got something to do with it. Second of all, they're purchasing with the intent to see an upswing. The Chinese believe that the economy is going to get better faster than just about any other economy in the world. And they're betting on it. So if you look at, as an example, their initial response to their real estate, they're just going to let it fall and hopefully come back. If you're looking at their whole geopolitical answer towards their relationship with the United States, it's starting to cool down or warm up a little bit. They're banking on a faster recovery, and they see their opportunity to resell, hold, and manage a little bit better than everyone else's. There's also some arguments that Russia only has so much they can sell. They have not been able to live up to orders as well as people thought that they could. So no, there's going to be consumption, man. And it may not be what people thought it could be. So there could be something more nefarious with overloaded capacity, overloaded purchasing, which could be stockpiling for a possible military end use. There are folks that are concerned that China is purchasing significant portions of this for a possible, I mean, you could do the math, right? Is it something for a Taiwanese invasion? Could it be for military expansion west? You can let your mind roam. I'm not nearly paranoid enough to spend the time to search the corners of the web to worry about it. But at a time when people are worried about energy, maybe that's the direction this is going. So stay tuned for something like that, Keenan. It could very well be exactly what is happening.
Very interesting insights. I hadn't been following the growing refining industry in China, but it makes sense for what they do with valuing that into all sorts of other products. But then, yeah, whether for actual skirmishes or invasion or the ability to bluff or negotiate as if they are ready to do such a thing, I hope we don't see large scale conflicts, obviously, though it's good to keep an eye on. Don't necessarily need to be paranoid to try to keep tabs of the risks and potentials out there.
Being prepared for it's a big part of it, right?
That's right.
So, yeah.
All
right. So last topic, this one got my attention. People are, when they're building down in certain parts of the world. And this takes a little bit of imagination. They're actually building below ground, in particular for warehousing. So all over the world, in places where real estate is actually quite expensive and where the ground is amenable to it, why not build down below? So imagine a parking garage, right? Many parking garages, particularly in urban spaces, will go well below the surface of the city. Same thing can be done for e-commerce warehouses. The same thing can be done for warehouses, period. So there's a new idea out there that we should be building below ground. And there's been a lot of advancements to architectural technology and to building technology that apparently allow this to be easier than before. The hard part is understanding whether or not you're digging in a place and whether or not you're building in a place right off the bat that probably is going to give you the results that you want right off the start. But honestly, Keenan, the places where our business thrives, most of it's already been built up. Most of it, there's already vast, expansive, multi-million square foot facilities. So the idea of being able to build below that, that's interesting. And I'll be fascinated to see what happens next with it.
Yeah, especially in the areas where you're closer to a lot of people, right? I imagine these warehouses are probably going to want to be closer to areas of distribution and where it's coming in, where it's going out, because you could have something out in the middle of nowhere and build above. But if you're going to be doing a lot of throughput, you might want to be closer to the action, and there's high prices of real estate. So going underground could be interesting. Have you seen any specific tech with it? Is it just better ground penetrating radar, or how are we able to do this so much better than we would have 20, 30 years ago?
The inexpensiveness of building and tunneling. It's just excavating has gotten cheaper. And I think that has a lot to do with the tunnel work that good old Elon's doing. So yep. I'll be watching this one pretty closely. I also want to know more about how the law works, because Elon really did. I mean, he said, who says I can't dig underneath this? Who says I can't build a warehouse underneath your warehouse if it's deep enough? When does this get weird, man? Like, when can someone just build a 25 million square foot warehouse underneath the city and doesn't have to ask permission if he was there first?
It's a whole new meaning to the phrase undercutting the competition. Yeah.
Hey-o. Mento, or if you're a fan of late '90s movies, I Drink Your Milkshake. Right? I mean, that was
That's
the whole
right.
point. You know, he drilled underneath everybody else's land and took all their oil. Well, what
Mm-hmm.
if you were able to build entire storage facilities for e-commerce under other people's? It's a fascinating question. I'm sure it's not cheap enough now where it's going to be a concern, but at some point it will be.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, a lot of property rights have ownership of the airways above them to a certain degree. And I wonder if that could apply below a building to a certain degree, you know, just like with the FAA overriding that and a plane's allowed to go over your property, maybe something like a regulated transportation system, boring style tunnel may be allowed, but interesting to see that we might be seeing more underground facilities. Also beneficial if there is an end of the world disaster. So also good news there.
Yeah, with the comet coming, right? Yeah, bring your chickens.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, I brought us in, so you bring us out, buddy.
Awesome. Well, I feel like we had some great topics today. Thank you for the insightful and engaging discussion as always. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in on your favorite podcast app or here on YouTube in video form. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again next week to cover more global trade this week. Thanks, Pete.
See ya. Good job, Kenan.